give us a little perspective on both what there's essentially two operative definitions for conference, and the most common one, of course, is not unlike what the Catholics call a diocese. But if you could talk about the annual conference, which is where the spirituality arose from.
Sure. The annual. When you say annual conference, you can refer to one of three things: the administrative body, which, as you say, is on par with a Catholic diocese. The New England Conference covers all of the New England states and half of Connecticut and the rest of New England. And there are more than 600 churches in the conference. The annual conference can also refer to the meeting that we have each year, I guess once a year. We just had it June 18th to 20th in Manchester, New Hampshire. And at that meeting, members gather, an equal number of laity and clergy, representatives from each church, and then retired clergy and laity who balance out that number so that there are equal representation of both. And we get together to worship, to talk about our future, to talk about our current ministries, and to do things like the resolution on the war on drugs, to take social positions, and the body votes on those. They're brought by members. Clergy members, churches, individuals, laity can bring those resolutions before the body. They can make amendments to them. They can make changes to them if they want, and then they decide whether or not that's a position they want to take as a conference or not.
Yeah, it's a very democratic way, essentially, of running a religion, but it's not merely. I mean, the conference brings people together in a very spiritual, cooperative environment where people look together to solve and address social, political, religious, ministerial issues of the day. So it's not just a bunch of people with a political agenda. It's really, there's a spirituality that arises from the brotherhood and sisterhood of these folks.
Yes, the process of discerning where God is in this conversation is clearly part of it. Wesley himself called holy conferencing or holy conversation the result of being led by the Holy Spirit, and that is always, we're always there looking for the movement of the Holy Spirit, discerning the will of God in our conversations. It's not just political discussion, certainly not.
So, Beth, Pat, let me jump in here. I just want to get a little bit of background on, how did this stance against this opposition to the war on drugs within the Methodist Church, how did that kind of progress? Was it something that started in a particular area and just kind of spread out through the other churches, or is this something that a stance that the church has had for some time that they're just making public at this point?
No, it's not. No, it's not a stance that they've had it for a time. This is a specific resolution that was brought before this annual conference. I should be clear that this is the New England Annual Conference of the Church. This is not the church as a denomination making this point. Now, this resolution could go before the General Conference. The General Conference is the worldwide church. That is the body that writes the rules for the church. They do it on it's the same basic principle where you have equal numbers of laity and clergy, of representatives, based on how many members you have in your conference. You send those to General Conference, and they work on the rules of the church, and that's how those rules are written. This resolution process is similar at the annual conference level, but this is a statement by the New England Annual Conference. We do not speak for other conferences in the United States or the central conferences, which are the international conferences. So we should be clear about that. But this resolution was brought by one of our members, a clergy member, brought it before the body, and gave a presentation. Most people when you have an action item, an item that needs to be voted on, like a resolution, you make a presentation to the body. They're allowed to ask questions, make comments. And in this case, Lieutenant Jack Cole, retired. He's one of the co-founders of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. He came and spoke to the members, and they were persuaded by the arguments that he made that the war on drugs has not been an effective measure in treating drug abuse. It has done more damage than good, and the body is supporting that.
Now, as an editorial note, we've had Judge Jim Gray, who is also highly placed within Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, and there are active Providence police officers who have been involved in law enforcement against prohibition, also involved with there's a group called Christians Against Prohibition. And the general recognition has been that the humanitarian crisis, and we've talked about this many times in the show, but this is an issue we're going to carry to our radio grave, is that the humanitarian crisis, health crisis, political crisis that has been caused by the war on drugs, combined with the unnecessary expenditure of billions of dollars in the American government, which is really nothing more than exercising crony capitalism on behalf of well-placed corporations, has been an atrocious failure. And it would appear, and I'm going to put words out there, and Beth can tell me if I'm right or wrong, that the conference, the New England Conference, has come to the realization that Christ, it is not Christ-like, in a sense, to prosecute and persecute people for not what is a moral failing, but an addiction, when in fact treatment would be more appropriate. Is that a fair statement?
Yes. I mean, the Book of Discipline, the United Methodist, which is, like I said, the rules of the United Methodist Church, calls on us to look for restorative justice, not punitive justice, to look for a way to heal and move forward. And, we talk about it as the war on drugs. The war on drugs leaves people in some communities in this country, particularly poor communities, particularly communities of color, living in the war zone. They are in the war zone. And when you're afraid to go out of your house and you're afraid to send your kids outside, and not to mention the people who have been directly affected by the violence that is inherent in drug dealing and the distribution and sale of drugs.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point to make as well. Is these are the social ills of the war on drug. There's an impact on our immigration crisis in this country. There's an impact on gang violence throughout the country in many urban and suburban areas. These violent gangs are financed and funded by illegal drug, the illegal drug trade. And these are the things that are frankly tearing at the fabric of our society.
Right. We've seen the American family crumbling as a result of people being literally rousted from their lives for low-level drug offenses on a selective basis, and then we wonder why there are so many social services that have to be dedicated to those very same communities, and then we hold them accountable for that. It's a pernicious, it's a disease in and of itself, this quote-unquote war on drugs. What I find compelling is that I'll call it, for lack of a better term, the religious establishment in this country has decided to challenge, the status quo on this, because it's interesting to me. This is really kind of a leap politically directly into law enforcement, in questioning, I think, some of the underlying morality of law enforcement as it is in this country today. What are your thoughts, Beth?
Well, you talk about morality. I mean, when you have people dying of overdoses because they don't know what they're purchasing, that's one aspect of illegal drugs. If you regulate and legalize drugs, you can control the substances themselves. There are people who are dying because of that. When you put a disproportionate number of people of color in prison, and then when they're in prison and charged with a felony, in many states you lose your right to vote. You've disenfranchised a whole group of people who have no voice now. And the church is a voice for the voiceless.
Is there a growing recognition that trying to be Christ-like, and when I say the term Christ-like, I'm actually trying to peel away some of the quote-unquote religious overtones and follow the lifestyle and the philosophies of Jesus Christ? Is there a growing recognition that these extra legal issues need to be conquered as well? In a sense, you need to reach beyond your protective shell outside of your comfort zone, and you can no longer ignore these if you're going to be Christ-like in this society today?
Well, sure. I mean, Christ spoke of when you help the least of these, you're helping me. Reaching out to the least of these is being the hands and feet of Christ. Being that in the community.
That is my favorite passage from the Bible. I believe it's Matthew 25, right?
Right.
That which you do unto the least of my brothers.
Right. Right. Exactly. And that's, the church has always done that. This may be a new stance for this conference on this specific issue, but the Methodist Church as a whole, as certainly as the New England Conference, has always reached out to those in need of a voice, those in need of a meal, those in need of advocacy. That is being the hands and feet of Christ.
Now, what has there been ramifications? Have you gotten much reaction from the political community, from the law enforcement community? Because it's interesting to me when you've got when you've got an individual working in government whose religion calls upon you and that you claim to be a part of, calls on you to behave in a manner which may be not in line with the behavior of that government that they're a part of. There's a tension there that's fascinating. Have you gotten much reaction from the governmental community as a result of this yet?
No, not so far. I have not. I can't. I don't know if it's just that. And it's only been a little over a week, or not even a week. So I'm not sure that.
Well, we're sure as heck going to try and get a reaction.
People are entitled to their voice. That's part of what the annual conference is all about. Is giving, certainly within the church, giving members a voice, and people are entitled to their voice for sure.
No, absolutely. Well, it to me, we've got a movement here called Regulate Rhode Island. We've had Jared Moffat on our show several times. As I mentioned earlier, we've also had Judge Jim Gray from Lee on several times. And there's a false morality that's often invoked to oppose the legalization and regulation of basic drugs, to take it out of this prohibition model, which has been proved so destructive. And I'm putting you on the spot here, so in one sense, so we're not going to hold you to this, but when you see that false morality out there that a government will use to justify their own behavior, whether it be casino gambling, whether it be the quote-unquote war on drugs, any one of the prejudicial behaviors that this government has exhibited towards Indians or the imprisoned. In your own words, what do you say to people? How do they juggle those two disparate viewpoints?
Well, people of faith are obliged to one of the calls of membership in the Methodist Church is witness, and service, and so you are obliged to speak up for what you believe in. And part of what the church's role can be is being a voice for this, and perhaps as a respected voice in the community, it will help people see the issue in a new light. To the issue in a new way, and maybe we can be a voice for those who were not being heard.
Well, and to me, I think what's so powerful about this statement is you've got a religious movement giving it a sense of authority to its members to object to what a lot of folks have recognized as immoral behavior, but have been either afraid, unwilling, or confused about confronting. When that which you look to for moral guidance gives you a clear direction like this, which is controversial, but at the same time very clearly articulated, I would hope that would give individual members of the Methodist Church the confidence in the faith to take this issue up to the next level and confront it on both a societal and a political level. And that's what I think is the ultimate beauty of this statement, because you're giving, power, you're giving words to the wordless and power to the powerless. And you're saying to people that it's okay, that it is in fact amoral to invoke the power of government to discriminate against people based on behavior or addictions. And it is immoral also to sit on the sidelines. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, and to the immorality of people dying in the violence that surrounds the drug trade, for people dying of overdoses because they don't know what they're purchasing, that's immoral too. And this resolution is not advocating drug use. You should not misunderstand that. That is not